Though games like Dark Souls and Cuphead have been criticized for being difficult for the sake of being difficult, there's a true merit in a game that feels impossible to beat when you first pick it up. Does Housemarque's Returnal deliver the latest uber-challenging roguelike? Or are you better off watching Groundhog Day?
I'm sorry, what was that again?
I'm a god.
Find out in our review. Hey folks, if you enjoyed the review, be sure to hit that like, subscribe, and notification button. It's 3 small clicks for you, but means the world to us. Let's get started. I can best describe Returnal as Alien meets Groundhog Day. After crash landing and finding herself stranded on Autopos, a strange planet, Astra Scout Celine faces grave threats in addition to unraveling mystery. Doomed to relive the experience every time she dies, players will have to beat the odds in order to figure out what's going on and how to get Celine back home. The story finds Celine stuck in a twisted time loop, where she constantly relives her ship crashing, and is forced once again to battle powerful creatures. It creates a really interesting mystery while actually adding some value to dying. Although it still sucks to have to start from scratch, it's more than just getting your progress wiped and hitting play again. Things are constantly changing, and there are even ways to help yourself on future runs.
I don't know enough to understand yet, but what conceivable force could have caused any intelligent life to become like this?
Though the game is certainly action first, Returnal has the atmospheric tension of a horror game. Not only are the environments twisted and off-putting, but some of the discoveries made along the way were enough to creep me out a few times. There's sequences where players walk through the halls of an old home, and it feels like a scene pulled directly from PT. To put it quite frankly, Returnal is one of the most challenging video games I've played in years. It's beyond cliche to compare a game to the likes of Dark Souls simply based on difficulty, but I really do believe that Returnal will sit beside it as some of the most difficult titles in the modern era. It's a full-on bullet hell, with players constantly having to juggle multiple enemies at once, all while making sure not to fall victim to the hazardous environments. It's a game that really forces you to learn and adapt to everything it throws at you. There's a wide variety of hostile creatures and enemies you'll come across, each of which have their own unique behavior pattern. There are foes that fire a spread of attacks, some that leap forward and pounce on you, ones that shoot homing attacks, and several others. As I grew to recognize and anticipate upcoming attacks, the combat really began to shine. Returnal really clicks when you have a good feel for the movement and traversal, using my jump and dash maneuvers to dodge attacks. Sprinting around the area leaping from platform to platform was nothing short of thrilling. There's a variety of weapons that players can find to take into battle in Returnal. You have handguns, rifles, shotguns, rocket launchers, and more. In addition, each weapon features an alt-fire mode, which can be used to deal big damage. Some of the alt-fire modes include an explosive blast shell, electrifying shock stream, and a tracking swarm. It's all completely randomized, so any weapon could potentially have any alt-fire mode. The combat in Returnal is just about perfect. The weapons feel great, while also being distinctly unique from one another. The ability to time your reload and overload a weapon adds another mechanic for players to master. And you can even use a sword in close range to deal heavy damage and knock down shields. The combat mechanics combined with the frenetic movement make for a superb roguelike experience. There are a series of bosses in Returnal that players will need to take down in order to make meaningful progress. Like any other enemy, bosses have a specific arsenal of attacks and a behavioral pattern that players can study and adapt to. I must have gotten killed by Frike, the game's first major boss, half a dozen times before I was able to take him out. Successfully killing bosses in Returnal is another level of rewarding and is very satisfying.
dispatched something.
Like any good roguelike, there are a lot of different power-ups and stat-affecting items to find during your adventure on Atropos. Artifacts are items that are stored in the player's inventory and provide boosts such as increased damage, or obolites, which is the game's currency. Consumables grant a temporary gain and are limited to a small handful of slots. One of the really interesting and cool items in Returnal are parasites. These creatures physically bind themselves to the player and offer really powerful bonuses. However, they also come with a strong negative side effect. Parasites can be stacked, but the player cannot remove them through conventional means. It creates a strategic dynamic where the player has to decide what they're willing to sacrifice in order to get the edge on enemies. When you die, all of your artifacts, consumables, obolites, and parasites are lost. It can be incredibly frustrating, but it's those high stakes that keep the player on edge at literally every moment. With as brutal and unforgiving as Returnal is, I really appreciate how clear and concise the level design and map layout is. The map shows all of the explored areas and indicates what doors players have and haven't entered. What's more, it also illustrates which of these doors leads to side paths, which ones continue the main path, and which doors will take you to a boss battle. If you want to spend more time gathering loot and resources before taking on the next boss, I can easily plan out my course of action. This is also really helpful when you consider that the world of Atropos is procedurally generated. Every time you die and start over, everything is moved around and rearranged. Those specific rooms may remain the same, they're in different locations and are incorporated into brand new layouts. Though I liked how it kept the experience fresh, I wasn't a fan of how the randomness impacted weapons and loot.
Considerable defense, but dispatched.
Weapons, artifacts, consumables, and parasites are also completely randomized in Returnal. Though this is indeed a staple of a roguelike genre, it's frustrating that some runs feel doomed to fail when all the game serves you up are sidearms, or if there are no bonuses worth your while. For a game as unforgiving as Returnal, it sucks when you feel like it wasn't entirely your fault that you failed. Returnal is strictly exclusive to the PS5, as it's one of the handful of next-gen games that aren't playable on its predecessor. Aside from being an excellent roguelike, Returnal is a technical marvel. The locations are also gorgeous and incredibly detailed. Even in moments where my screen was flooded with action and chaos, the PS5 held strong and I experienced practically no major stutters or hiccups. Returnal is also a true showcase of how spectacular the DualSense controller is. Players pull down the L1 trigger halfway to aim down the sights, and you can feel a bit of a draw and kickback when you do so. Pulling the trigger all the way is how you activate Alt-Fire. I originally thought this would be confusing and lead to screw-ups, but the DualSense tech makes it so easy that I don't think it happened a single time. The controller also emits a sound cue from its built-in speaker to let players know when their Alt-Fire is fully charged and ready to be used again. If you stand still, you can even feel the raindrops falling and hitting Celine's spacesuit thanks to the haptic feedback.
The journey is almost over. The origin of White Shadow is right here.
Housemarque reminds audiences that it's got the chops to be one of the premier tier game developers with Returnal. The game is wholly difficult with a roster of powerful enemies and bosses to overcome, but also gives the player everything they need in order to succeed. The game just gets better as you go on, as recognizing patterns and learning to adapt is endlessly rewarding. Despite some issues with RNG, it's hard to knock this creepy sci-fi adventure. Returnal is a must-play PS5 exclusive for any roguelike fan itching for their latest challenge. Hey folks, if you enjoyed the review, make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and notification button. It's 3 small clicks for you, but means the world to us. Thanks for watching. For more video reviews and everything else gaming related, you're already in the right place. You're on Shacknews.com.